let's quickly recap what we did in the other class before we start up with today's lecture. We started off with horizontal marketing system. We had done vertical marketing system, whereby we studied 3 types of vertical marketing systems. Then we, in the last class, we learned about horizontal marketing system. Now what happens in horizontal marketing system is when 2 or more companies at one level join together, follow a new marketing opportunity. That is a horizontal marketing system. We talked about how McDonald's and Sinopec have joined together, and McDonald's would now open its restaurants in or on the Sinopec gasoline centers, right? So on the fuel stations, McDonald's would open up its restaurants or pickup counters. So that is a horizontal marketing system example. Then we talked about multi-channel distribution system, whereby the companies necessarily don't have to use one single way of distributing their product. They could use a direct channel whereby they could take orders from the internet, or they could go for a 2-level or a 1-level channel. So they could use a combination of different levels in distributing their product. So that is a hybrid marketing channel or a multi-channel distribution system. And that is how a multi-channel distribution system might look like, whereby you have retailer in one of your product flows, and on the other hand you have a direct product flow from the producer to the end customer in terms of catalog, telephone, internet. Now we talked about disintermediation. Disintermediation is a phenomena whereby you eliminate different intermediaries. Intermediaries are all those bodies who help you take the product from the producer to the end consumer, right? So if you eliminate those in-between bodies, that is disintermediation. Now disintermediation is both a threat and an opportunity for many of the firms. A threat for those firms who do not want to evolve with the changing technology, evolve with the changing trends that are there. So for instance, we talked about brick and mortar stores, the physical stores, and how they need to take this thing into consideration and sort of go online, or maybe change their way of delivery so that people might keep on using their product, but in a different way. So that is disintermediation. Then we talked about channel design decisions. We talked about analyzing consumer needs, setting up channel objectives, identifying major channel alternatives, and evaluation. So in analyzing consumer needs was we talked about how you want to sort of choose a target level of service, and work accordingly so that you could deliver that particular targeted level of service. And then you need to choose best channels to use with reference to this target level that you've chosen. And the idea is always to minimize the cost of meeting customer service requirements. Then we talked about setting channel objectives. Again, you cannot target everybody, or you cannot deliver exactly what customer wants. So you need to choose yourself a targeted level of service, and you need to balance out the cost and the consumer needs. Then we talked about types of intermediaries. How many types of intermediaries you want to keep in your system depends entirely upon you, right? So depends on what sort of environment that you're working in, what sort of product that you produce, that all this decides how many types of intermediaries you want to keep in your system. So in case you're producing a very customized product, very tailored product, then having a direct channel would be the best option for you, since you need to come in direct contact with the customer. So this is what designers do. This is what your average tailor would do. You come in direct contact with the person. That's because the product itself is very tailored, very customized. So the ease of standardization would decide what type of intermediary you would want in your system. Another thing that might decide would be your resources, how many resources you have, what sort of product do you sell. So if your product is very perishable, then probably you might want to go for a direct channel. You would want to eliminate all the intermediaries so that the product reaches to the customer very quickly, right? So it depends upon the product's nature itself. So that is how types of intermediaries affect. The number of marketing intermediaries you want to have in your system, we talked about, again depends on your product. So if your product is an FMCG, it is a everyday consumer good, you want to make sure that it is available everywhere and anywhere. So for that you need intensive distribution, right? If your product is a very luxury product, not everybody could afford it, then you might want to place it exclusively, and it might fall under exclusive distribution. And something that is in between exclusive distribution and intensive distribution would fall under selective distribution. So your home appliances, computer, laptops, all these services, they fall under selective distribution. And then responsibilities of channel members, they need to work together to deliver superior value. Then we talked about evaluating major alternatives. How do you evaluate? There's a certain criteria upon which you want to evaluate. First is the economic criteria. You need to do the cost-benefit analysis. You need to see how much control are you willing to lose. So every time you add an intermediary, that essentially means you're losing some control over your supply chain. Somebody else is now going to be there for you to handle the system, so therefore you would lose some control over the system. Again, a sort of evaluative criteria for you to look into. And the last one was adaptability criteria. Now adaptability criteria takes into account your long-term commitments, right? So what sort of long-term commitments do you have, and how does your channel design accommodate those long-term commitments? So there needs to be adaptability between your long-term commitments and the channel design that you sort of incorporate, right? So they need to work together well, they need to gel in well so that they might work. Then we talked about designing international distribution system. We talked about how every country has its own laws, has its own rules and regulations, has its own target market. So for every market that you're getting into, you need to realize that it might have its own limitations, and you need to address those limitations by altering your channel design. So for every country, for every new market that you enter, you need to study that market so that you can design the channel distribution network, the channel, according to that particular market. Now let's get to today's lecture. Today we're going to talk about channel management designs. Now, how do you select? The first step when it comes to channel management decisions is selecting channel members. Now, for many organizations, it's very easy to select, any channel member or any supplier or distributor, for the simple reason that they're very powerful. The size of the company, the power of the company, the resources of the company are, it's so resourceful that, everybody wants to work with that company. So for them, it's very easy to get, suppliers and distributors. So for companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, Nestle, Toyota, Honda, it's very easy to get distributors for such big names. But for other companies who are very small, it takes quite a lot of time, a lot of hard work to convince dealers and to convince the suppliers that they need to be part of the system, right? So for every type of companies, the selecting channel, the process of selecting channel members may be different. Right. When you're selecting channel members, there are different considerations that you need to take into, so sort of how many product lines does your channel member already carries, and would he be able to accommodate your, product line or not? How resourceful he is, what sort of distribution can he do, and does it align with, the sort of distribution you want? So there are different considerations that you need to keep in mind so that you could select an appropriate channel member for your company. Then the next step is managing channel members. Now, how do you manage channel members? You need to continuously motivate them. You need to continuously, keep them informed what the company is doing, what sort of objectives the company needs to meet, and how could they help in meeting those objectives. So, continuous motivation, continuous encouragement, continuous support from the company is required for the wholesalers, for the retailers, so that they may be able to help the company achieve its target. So that's the second step, second and third step. Then evaluating channel members. Now you need to, once you've had the channel members on board, you cannot keep them forever in case they're not performing, right? So the good idea is to keep evaluating your channel members every now and then. That helps you keep the good members, the more profitable members on board, and sort of leave those members who are sort of burden on your company, right? So you need to keep only those members on board that add value to your company, that add value to your product. Then when it comes to distribution, you also need to look into public policy. Public policy, what is public policy? What's public policy?
Is it the policy of the company, how to go in public?
Public policy is a policy for the betterment of the consumer, a policy made for the betterment of the consumer. So the general idea about when it comes to public policy and your distribution channel is that you do not want to create a system or a market whereby people can charge whatever whatever amount they want to for a product. You don't want to create monopolies. You want to create a healthy competition within the market. So that's the idea of public policy. For the betterment of the consumer, if there's free competition, there would be more products available, there would be better products available, and then the products might be cheaper, right? So that's the idea of public policy and distribution system. So here the book discusses about exclusive distribution. So what companies do is they enter into exclusive dealing contracts with the distributors. Now it is fine to enter a contract that talks about exclusive distribution. Exclusive distribution means when seller requires the seller not handle competitor products, right? So for company ABC, it enters into an agreement with the retailer, and the retailer can no longer sell the products of competitors. So Nestle tells the retailer not to sell products of Engro or for that matter any other company. That would be an exclusive dealing agreement, right? So that would be an now what happens is it's not against the law to enter into an exclusive dealing agreement as long as you do not hinder sort of the free market competition. But once you start affecting the competition that is in the market, and you try to create monopoly, that's where public policy comes in, and that's where the government would discourage you creating exclusive agreements with different suppliers, right? So what would this do if companies start entering exclusive agreements? The new competitors would not come in. So for instance, for giants like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, it's very easy to enter exclusive agreements. If they keep on entering into exclusive agreements, the small competitors, the new businesses that come up, they won't be able to sustain, right? Because nobody is there to place their product onto their shelves, right? So as a result of which, the new competition would not be able to enter into the market, and as a result of which, your small industry would fail, and it would never be able to grow, which could result in significant loss for the economy of the country. So you want to discourage monopoly creation. You want to encourage competition within an economy, and that's what public policy and distribution decisions talks about. Now there are exclusive territorial agreements where producer-seller limits the territory that they would be working in. That is very common in franchising, right? So what happens in franchises is that a particular franchise is designed to cater to, a certain territorial boundary. For instance, McDonald's, how many McDonald's are there in Islamabad? The proper setup, not the malls one. Two. Which one's the second one?
We had one on the highway, but I guess
That's not there anymore. 4? Where? No, we're talking about Islamabad only. We're talking about just particularly Islamabad. Then it's just one, right? For this particular reason. If we talk about whole of Islamabad, then we have one in DHA as well, right? A proper setup. So if we talk about a proper setup of McDonald's, not the malls one, but the proper setup of McDonald's, there are only 2 to cater to Islamabad, right? So that is how McDonald's makes sure that it has set territorial boundaries. So for instance, the McDonald's that is there in F9 Park, it is designed, or it has been made to cater to the people of, let's say, the sectors that are in its surroundings, right? So for G10, F10, F9 sectors are around that particular, setup. They're designed to serve those. That is territorial agreements that happens in, franchises. Franchises make a deliberate and active effort on part of the company that, 2 franchises, 2 outlets of a particular company do not come in direct competition with each other. So the McDonald's in DHA would never be in competition with the McDonald's here at F9 Park. Now this is not coincidental, but this is a deliberate effort on part of the company, right? So this is what? This is exclusive territorial agreements. Then there are tying agreements. Tying agreements are agreements whereby you limit the supplier that, if you carry this product, you have to carry our whole product line on your, product list, right? So that is a tying agreement. Tying agreements are agreements where the dealer must take most or all of the product line. So if you're keeping milk pack on your shelves, then you must keep Nestle Fruta Vitals, Nestle yogurt, and so on and so forth. So you need to keep all our products onto the shelf if you're keeping one of the product on the shelf. So that is a tying agreement. So within a certain extent they're allowed, but if you go beyond that certain extent, then it becomes a major public policy issue and needs to be dealt accordingly. Right, so marketing, logistics, and supply chain, nature and importance of marketing logistics. So what is marketing logistics? Marketing logistics involves planning, implementing, controlling, and the physical flow of goods, services, and the related information from point of origin to the end customer, right? So that is marketing logistic, that is physical distribution of goods or services. Now if you see here, that is a sort of marketing logistics or supply chain channel. Now there's suppliers here, there's company, there are resellers, and then there are customers. The product from suppliers or the raw material from suppliers reaches the company through logistics that we call inbound logistics, right? So whenever the raw materials come in the system, they come through inbound logistics. When the company produces the product and it sends the product off to the resellers, it goes through outbound logistics. So you've produced the product, the end product needs to go to the customer, it would reach the customer through reseller. So whenever the product moves from the company to the reseller, there might be a wholesaler, that might be a retailer, so that in that case it is called outbound logistics. And whenever a broken product, a product that has gone bad, it comes back from the customer, it comes back from the reseller, it comes back from the company and goes back to the supplier. It is called reverse logistics, right? So for instance, the product reached the customer and the customer realized that one of the parts is broken. It returns the product back to the reseller. That would be through reverse logistics. Now what reseller would do is it would send it back to the company. Again, reverse logistics. And if the company realizes that it was because of the fault of the supplier, then it might send it back to the supplier. Again, reverse logistics. So this is the nature and importance of right, so you need to, supply chain management is the process of managing upstream and downstream value-added flows of materials, final goods, related information among suppliers, the company, resellers, and final consumers. So whatever we saw was your supply chain, and supply chain management talks about value-added flows of materials from final goods to and related information among suppliers, company, resellers, and final consumers. Now these are major logistics functions. The first function is warehousing, the second one is inventory management, the third one is transportation, and the fourth one is logistics information management. So these are four major functions of logistics. Now when it comes to warehousing decisions, there are many important decisions that you need to take. How many warehouses do you need? Right? What types of warehouses do you need? Do you need distribution centers or do you need storage centers? Right? Then where to locate these warehouses? What would be the best location whereby you could reduce the transportation cost and make the delivery really very efficient? Right? So these are a few important decisions that the company has to take when it comes to distribution. Right, so there are storage houses and then there are distribution centers. Storage houses are created to store the product, the end product that you've created, right? So to store the product you have storage houses. Now since the production cycle and the selling cycle do not usually match, what happens is that during the production cycle you keep producing the product and you keep storing it for the selling cycle. So for instance, GFC does not stop making fans during winters. It does make fans, but it keeps on storing those for summers where it would experience a surge in their demand. There would be an increase in their demand during summers, right? So that's where your storage warehouses come in handy. And then you have distribution centers where the product comes and goes to the retailer or reseller, right? So these are distribution centers where the product is not stored for a very long period of time. They are just meant to store the product for as long as, the distribution network calls for the product. So those are distribution centers. Now inventory management is also another important major logistic function that the distribution network has to perform. How do you manage the inventory? Now there's a certain cost that is associated with carrying the inventory. That is called the carrying cost of the inventory. Now carrying cost is as a result of maybe you're hiring the warehouse, so you have to pay the rent. There's a certain temperature on which you need to keep the product. Again, electricity bills would go high. That is again a cost. So different costs are associated with maintaining a certain level of inventory. So what companies do is they try to maintain minimum inventory possible so that they could reduce the carrying cost that is associated with inventory management. Now when you reduce the carrying cost, that essentially means you're not carrying a lot of inventory. That could result in a customer going back home without buying the product because the product was simply not available, right? Because you're not carrying enough inventory. So how do you deal with this problem? You deal with this problem through just-in-time, right? So just-in-time systems help you identify how much inventory is left in your warehouse, in your distribution center, or in your store, and it quickly places the order itself, realizing that the inventory has gone low, right? So if it realizes, forecasting what has happened in looking at the past trends, it would realize that only 3,000 units of this particular products are left, and we expect them to sell in the next, let's say 2-3 hours. Let's place the order and get the products in before the product runs out, right? So that is just-in-time system. So you have RFID, knowing the exact product location. So you have RFID tags that tell you exact location of the product, and then you have smart shelves who place the order automatically in the system, and the supplier could send in the product. Then you have transportation. Again, a very important decision for distribution center. How would you transport your product? It costs a lot of money to transport your product, so you need to ensure that you choose the appropriate transportation model for your product. So the transportation affects the pricing of product, delivery, performance, and condition of the goods when they arrive. So if you sell very perishable product, for instance flowers, and you send it through, let's say, truck, the product might go bad by the time it reaches to the end customer. So you need to choose an alternate strategy for that particular product. So you need to keep in mind the nature of the product and how the product might be transported. So for instance, you could transport the product on a truck, you could transport the product on rail, you could transport the product through water, pipeline, air, internet. So all these are useful modes of transporting your product. Then your book also has an intermodal transportation. It talks about how you can choose a combination of different modes of transportation, and you could deliver your products. For instance, you could use both truck and rail to transport your product. You could use water and air to transport your product. So there are different options whereby you combine different modes of transportation and deliver the product. That is intermodal transportation. It talks about fishy-back, piggyback, train ships. So whereby train ship is trains and water. Piggyback is truck and rails. So these are different models in an intermodal transportation. Then logistics information system is the management of the flow of information, including customer orders, billing, inventory levels, customer data. So you need to keep in mind logistic information management so as to appropriately deal with the customer, appropriately manage your supply chain, appropriately manage your marketing channels. So what happens is the customer data comes in, as a result of which it gets into the system. You realize your future what would be the demand in the near future. So all these aspects come in handy when you have logistics information system in place. So for logistic information system, you have electronic data interchanges, that is EDI systems that are in place that deal with logistic information system. Then we talked about integrated logistic management, which is a concept that is recognition that providing customer service and trimming distribution costs requires teamwork internally and externally. So to make sure that your supply chain is well managed, you need to go for an integrated logistics management, whereby you could create cross-functional teams that could come together and make sure that every element of the organization, every function of the organization is well represented, and the organization and all its members could work in a unified system to create value. So that is integrated logistics management, where internal and external bodies both come together to reduce cost and deliver value to the customer. And then we took an important element when it comes to integrated logistics management is third-party logistics. Now, many companies feel that managing their distribution network is quite a task, right? So, you need to see the suppliers, you need to make sure that the product reaches, on time, there are no faults in the product. So it's quite a task to manage your distribution system. So what they do is they go for third-party logistics. Now, third-party logistics is the outsourcing of logistic function to third-party logistics providers. So your TCS is a third-party logistics, your DHL, your UPS, these are all third-party logistics that help you deliver the product from the customer to the from the producer to the end customer, and they're a useful way to avoid any extra burden that might be there because of you doing all the work. How would third-party logistics help you? They would help you in a way that you could better concentrate on your product rather than worrying for the logistics of your product, and then it would also help you minimize the cost, since the third-party logistics people, they're more specialized in their field and they know how to reduce the cost. Since they know their job, so therefore it helps you both reduce the cost and helps you better concentrate on your product. Questions so far? With this, we've come to the end of the chapter.